Yeah.
But it seems to me that a great lyric springs from a great title and a great idea. You know, that's the first thing you shoot for. I am also of the old school of lyric writing in terms of craft. You know, when I was learning my craft of songwriting, I was looking at the masters from the 40s and the 50s and even into the 60s. In fact, the guy that was teaching one of the workshops would give us a song that was a big hit and say, okay, I want you to rewrite a completely different lyric to it. You will match up every syllable in that song, and you will do the same rhyme pattern and the same structure.
Wow.
And it taught you to respect the craft that they used back then. I mean, what really ticks me off is when I see, you know, usually today's standard structure is verse, chorus, bridge out. You know, and when you look at the first verse and the second verse, and there's no relationship to the length of the lines or where the meter's falling or where the accents are, you know, it's obvious they're just treading water until they can get to that chorus that repeats. I want to see the second verse be a mirror image, and I'll cut people slack on pickup notes, you know, but I don't want to hear a single syllable word at the end of an important line, and in the next verse see a 2 or 3 syllable word with different accents in the same position. That's just sloppy writing. And when I see that, immediately, if it's a great idea, I send it back to the writer. When I get material, you know, 99 out of 100 are going into the ash can or back into the self-addressed stamped envelope. Of the one remaining, that doesn't mean that it's signed and ready to go and perfected. It may be, but probably in 3/4 of the cases, I'm asking for a rewrite or a cleanup for them to fix things. And here's why. Melodically, you want a chorus that repeats, well, the chorus is going to repeat exactly the same, but you want verses that repeat, because if the second verse is identical melodically to the first, that's a double impression that embeds itself on the subconscious. And I tell people, if I have to listen to your song more than 4 or 5 times before I can hum the majority of it back, it's not a memorable melody. If you look at the standards in the heyday, the golden era of songwriting, they were perfectionists with craft. And so when you heard 3 verses, and in that era it was verse, bridge, verse. Well, after you'd heard that verse 3 times, exactly the same, you could almost hum it back after listening to the song once or twice.
Sure.
Because you'd heard that same chorus 6 or 9 times, and it was identical. It's very hard for a listener to memorize something that is sort of like 80 to 90% the same. It's a lot easier to memorize 2 things that are completely different than it is 2 things that are, you know, like 70% the same, trying to remember, well, where the changes are and where they're not. So if you want a song to be a standard, it has to be a memorable melody. If you want a memorable melody, the craft has to be very consistent melodically. And then lyrically, you know, the same thing. I want, you know, if you have a rhyme scheme set up in your first verse, it better reappear in the second verse. And a lot of times I get, like I just had somebody submit a song about a month ago, and it was a great idea, and the music was really happening, a super feel, but the lyric was awful. And the reason the lyric was awful is they used the same vowel sound as their rhyming, their major, you know, like you usually rhyme on the 2nd and 4th line in a verse. Well, each verse was using the same vowel song. So you were hearing ear, 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 ear in all 3 or 4 of the verses. And it was really boring.
Wow.
And, you know, it just sounded boring. They were saying different things, but it sounded boring, you know. And if a writer knows what they're doing craft-wise, they're going to know, okay, if I use the ooh rhyme as my predominant rhyme in the first verse, I better use an E in the second. And if I have a third, I better use an A. And if I have a fourth, maybe I better use an I. So that you have that variety of just the sound coming to the ear, so it doesn't sound monotonous.
Yeah, great suggestion. So you mentioned to me earlier that you'd prefer to hear a really rough demo of the song so that you could make some suggestions to the writer on how best to rewrite that would appeal more to you. How rough are we talking, like a cappella on GarageBand?
Well, no, I would never want an a cappella. I've got to hear the harmonization. And I'm saying a piano vocal or a guitar vocal will work. Now, the reason I like to hear a rough is because having been a songwriter, and a pretty darn good one if I do say so myself, and I'm very demanding about craft. And so in 3/4 of the songs that I signed, I probably required one or more rewrites. Now, the song I was just referring to, I gave them a lengthy critique on it, and I don't do critiques unless I think the song has really got tremendous potential, because I just don't have time to be, a song critic for songs to teach songwriting. But this song had great potential, and so I gave them, probably 20 different notes. They incorporated every single one of them and perfected them, and the lyric went from really boring and mediocre to just stellar, with fresh rhymes I'd never heard of, and they were so open to rewriting.
Awesome.
But getting back to, now I forgot your question. What was it again?
How rough can that demo be used?
Oh, how rough.
Yeah.
Yeah, but again, if it's a ballad or a mid-tempo, I can tell. If you're sending in a dance song, I am going to need more of a track. I'm not going to be able to judge a dance song from a piano vocal or a guitar vocal.
Mm-hmm.
So, or if it's a real up-tempo and punchy rock, a little more embellishment. But I'm not looking for people. See, ultimately, I tell the writers whose songs that I am interested in and eventually perfected, so, you're going to have to go to the trouble of supplying the broadcast quality master. I mean, 25 years ago, we all wrote a song, we went to the studio, we brought in 5 musicians, and God, we hoped that when we came out it was at the right tempo and there were no glaring errors in it, because we just spent $500 on a demo.
Yep.
Nowadays, with the cost of recording gear and computers and all that stuff, if you're a composer and you don't have a setup to produce what I would call a broadcast quality master demo recording, you're not really serious about your career. I don't care how broke you are. Carpenters don't go to a job without hammers and saws.
Yeah.
If you show up as a carpenter at a job and say, well, I can saw and I can hammer, but you need to supply the tools, they'll get somebody else. Yeah. And it's the same in songwriting. So, if you have your own demo studio at home, and you're a lousy singer, that's okay. If you can knock out something that shows me a little more. But when I used to run a lyric workshop, I did not allow anybody to play a tape or a CD at that time until we had, workshopped the lyric on the page. Once the lyric was in shape and happening and the craft was all there on the page, then I'd say, okay, let's hear what it sounds like. Because invariably people would tell me, well, I know the lyric's weak, but, it's carried by the music. Well, I don't want the lyric carried by the music, and I don't want the music carried by the lyric. I want 2 pieces of the pie, each perfected, and then joined together into something that's stellar.
Awesome. I think that's great. You want, yeah.
That's what people are requiring of me when I send out songs as a publisher to producers. And I also tell writers, I say, if there's a weak line or 2 in the song, I say, you're setting yourself up for a hit. I'm going to send that to a producer, and they're going to go, we love it, but we just want to change 2 lines. Oh, by the way, that makes us co-writers, doesn't it? So when I see those problems, I want them fixed. And what I tell writers, though, I've had writers send me, songs that are fully demoed. They've spent $500 to $700, $800 on a really great master recording. I'm sensitive to that, and I tell them, look, rewrite your lyric. If we're only changing 3 or 4 lines, then when I send the lyric sheet along with the CD, I'll just bold those lines and underline them, and under the title at the top, I'll put, please use revised lyric as see bold and underline. And that way, unless they lose the lyric sheet and do a takedown if they're going to re-record it, they'll know enough, hopefully, because not everybody calls me to tell me that they're going to use a song I've submitted. Sometimes I find out after it's recorded and mixed, and the label calls for label copy and publisher credits, and then I find out they did the song. So, but I can take a real simple one, but if it's a rhythmic song and I could sign a song with, like I say, not a great lyric, but if the music just makes me want to get up and dance around the room, like that pop song Jump by the Pointer Sisters or something, I couldn't listen to that without my body twitching. So if somebody sent me a Christmas song like that, I'd probably sign it.